and welcome to the GuideStar Impact Call. My name is Gerald, and I will be in the background answering any WebEx technical questions. If you do experience technical difficulties during or joining the WebEx session, please dial 1-866-229-3239. Please note that as an attendee, you are part of a larger audience. However, due to privacy rights, we have chosen not to display the number or list of attendees to everyone on the call today. As a reminder, today's call is being recorded. We will be holding a Q&A session at the conclusion of today's presentation. However, you can submit an online question at any time throughout the presentation today by simply typing the question into the Q&A panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. Just type your question into the text field and click Send. Please keep the Send to defaulted to all panelists. With that, we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy today's presentation. I would like to introduce you to your first speaker and moderator for today's call. She is the Director of Communications with GuideStar, Ms. Lindsay Nichols. Ms. Nichols, you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Impact Call for GuideStar. We're so thrilled that you're with us today. I wanted to mention just a couple of housekeeping items. First, we're live tweeting during this webinar, so we'd love if you would join the conversation there. We're using the hashtag GuideStar, and you can ask questions that way as well. And you can also ask questions using the chat box, and if we don't get to all of your questions, we will have a post on the GuideStar blog after, and we'll answer as many as we can there. And finally, I wanted to mention we will send all of you an email with today's PowerPoint and recording of this live presentation very soon. Now, I am pleased to introduce Mari Qureshi, GuideStar's newly elected board chair and co-founder and president of Global Giving Foundation.
Thank you, Lindsay. And welcome, everyone, to GuideStar's first ever Impact Call. Before I introduce Jacob and James, I just wanted to provide a little context for this call. Now, this call is an attempt on GuideStar's part to open up the lines of communication with their constituents, first and foremost, by being transparent in our results. And we hope that this begins a systematic dialogue that supports data-driven decision-making across the sector. Now, a core part of our business model is sharing nonprofit information forms. These are a very powerful baseline for its database. But as everyone knows, who's probably on this call, by their very nature, they are at least a year out of date, if not more. And we at GuideStar want to pilot a mechanism for timelier reporting. This therefore is part and parcel of the broader real-time data reporting mechanisms that GuideStar is engaged in, including, of course, GuideStar Exchange. And we want that reporting to be not just about the financials, which is, of course, what the 990 is about, but as much as possible around programmatic and sort of prospective, future direction information. So in a spirit of learning by doing, we wanted to pilot this mechanism to see if we ourselves can be more inclusive and whether we can open up a line of dialogue. So please feel free to ask questions. This is what this is all about. And I'm very happy to introduce Jacob Harold, GuideStar's president and CEO, who will outline GuideStar's evolving strategy and highlight its 2013 operational and programmatic results. After Jacob, James Lum, GuideStar CFO, will discuss its financials, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So over to you, Jacob.
Thanks a lot, Mari, and welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have you. We are currently at 399 live participants. That's got to be at least 400 people, because I know there are 3 in the room where I am right now. And we're thrilled to have this much interest in GuideStar's organizational trajectory and our work to help support the work of all of you on the phone and to be what we like to call a scaffolding for social change. As Mari said, we're both going to have some prospective comments, but also retrospective comments. And the bulk of the time is going to be spent looking back on the last year, what's happened, what we can share with you all, and what we've learned as well. And as we've said, we really do want to invite you all to be a part of this conversation and hope that at least 20 minutes, maybe even half of this conversation can be a dialogue back and forth with you. So I'm going to offer a slide here, which I do not expect you to be able to see on your screens. This is something that we carry around and we print out on giant poster-sized pieces of paper. But this is the vision for GuideStar, which is to be the hub of a supply chain of information, gathering many different kinds of information from nonprofits and sharing them through many different channels for different kinds of users, whether nonprofits themselves, individual donors, foundation staff, people who work in financial services, journalists, researchers, et cetera. And this is the vision that we are working towards. And everything that we do is a means towards this end. GuideStar is not important in and of itself. What is important is the work that we allow others to do, that we enable others to do. So with that, I'm going to spend just a minute to go over the strategic vision that we put together to guide our work going forward, and then get right into the retrospective reporting on our last year. And there are three pieces to what we try and do. We collect data, we distribute it, and then we innovate on top of that supply chain. And there are ways on each of these three pieces of our overall strategy that we're trying to get stronger and better. So on the collection side, we're simply trying to collect more data. And we're trying to collect better data, higher quality data that better reflects the complexity of nonprofits. And then just faster data. As Mari said, this is one of many experiments to figure out how can we get data out more quickly to the field. On the distribution side, we want to be able to reach more people. We're able to currently reach 6.7 million individuals directly through our website each year, and many millions others. We recognize that's only a fraction of our potential audience. And we want to reach people with greater depth. And be able to offer them not just the answers to simple questions, but to provide enough information that they can tackle some of the harder problems of social change. And then thirdly, we are seeking a system that's more interconnected, where all of the different platforms, whether grants management software or donor relation software, various databases of impact information can all be brought together, woven together into a shared system to help us all do our work. And then from this basic supply chain of collecting data and distributing it, there are several ways we really want to innovate. One is to, as Mari said, build on top of the existing primarily financial information that you see in the Form 990 to have more and more data about nonprofit programs. Second is to provide context for the data that we provide. So, for example, you could imagine a literacy organization in Chicago. We want to be able to provide contextual data about literacy rates in Chicago when sharing information about that organization. And then finally is convenience. We simply just want to make it easier for all of our users to navigate all of this data that's relevant for the work that we all do. So let me spend a little bit of time going through some of our programmatic results for the last year. I'm going to do one slide on each of these three pillars: data collection, data distribution, and data innovation. And it's worth noting that many of these are critical metrics we've measured for a long time, and some of them are ones that we've been experimenting with, and we're very much in the middle of trying to evolve and update the way that we collect data to make sure we're collecting the right data in a way that's useful for us to help us be more effective. So here on the data collection side, let me note a couple different categories of information. In the first one, we have the number of images of Forms 990, which is up 7% in the last year. That's something where it is unequivocally good to have more of those images. But in the second one, the number of conversations we have with nonprofits each year, whether that's over the phone or over email or through a live chat, is also up. But I think it's fair for us to pause and say, is it necessarily good to have more of those conversations? If, for example, that means that nonprofits are having trouble updating their information or are having other questions. And so it's important to keep all of this data in context, to keep in mind that sometimes you want a number to go up, sometimes you want it to go down, and sometimes you just want to optimize it at the right level. So we hope that this data not only gives us a chance to occasionally pat ourselves on the back, but also sometimes to realize those moments when we need to pivot. We need to change what we're doing so we can be more effective. For the second half of this particular slide, I'll note that we restructured the GuideStar exchange, which is the mechanism that allows us to gather information directly from nonprofits. And we created a tiered system. So we're not able to provide comparative data with last year because this is new. But going forward, this is going to be a critical metric for us because this represents the quality and depth of our data and the strength of our relationships with nonprofits. So we can't show a trajectory on these particular metrics, but you can bet that down the road we will be sharing how we're doing relative to the past on these. On to the second slide. This is for data distribution. The first one is website visits. That's the number of times that people came to the site, not number of people. And we're very, very pleased with those results, up 24% in the last year. But potentially more exciting is the second row, which is web services hits. And what that means is that's when another website that displays GuideStar's data basically calls up GuideStar's database and asks for some information, which it then shows on its own website. In the long run, we think this is a very important part of our future because we know that while we may have millions of users on our site, we are only one of 600 million websites in the world, and there are many other ones that could be enriched with some of our data. We're pleased to see the growth in social media followers, although we also recognize in that case that we're riding a broader societal trend. One that I'll note has gone down, although this is on purpose, is the number of marketing emails that we've sent out, as we're beginning a process of dialing back the number of emails, which we know are very valuable for many of our users, and that's why they're on our email lists. But we want to make sure that we keep the quality up. The third of the three pillars, data innovation, I just have a couple of metrics here. These are from our Philanthropedia reviews of nonprofits, where we survey experts and ask for their opinion about nonprofits. You can expect to see as we go forward, and we do more of the new kinds of projects that we have laid out in our strategic plan, that we'll be having an increasing number of quantitative metrics under this data innovation category that we'll be following. So that's a quick summary of the quantitative results of the last year. There's a lot more behind this, but we don't want to overwhelm you all. But it's not just about the quantitative results, it's also about qualitative results. And so I just want to highlight a few things that we've launched in the last year. As I mentioned, a new version of the GuideStar Exchange with these 3 tiers of participation. A couple new products, GuideStar Premium Pro and a new version of the financial scan product. Notably, a new project or product that we launched with the technology affinity group called Simplify, which allows a foundation to, through its grants management software interface, directly access GuideStar data and bring that in to the processes that foundations use to make decisions about their grants. This is, we believe, a step towards a common profile in the nonprofit sector. We also spent a lot of time and energy this year on the overhead myth campaign, our attempt to address what we believe is the myth that financial ratios are a proxy for nonprofit performance. We recognize they are at times an important filter for addressing those rare cases of fraud or gross financial mismanagement in the nonprofit sector. But that if we really want to maximize the impact of the nonprofit community, then we have to focus on results and programs and move beyond this starvation cycle that affects so many nonprofits. We've also done quite a bit of research and new infographics in the last year. And then finally, we were thrilled to work with Amazon as they launched their new Amazon Smile initiative, which is powered by GuideStar's database and which begins to capitalize on the immense reach of Amazon.com. Going forward into 2014, we have these 18 objectives. They are the way that we are structuring our attention for this next year as we try and move towards this longer-term vision that I outlined of a robust, multidimensional supply chain of information about nonprofits that helps all the stakeholders of social change make good decisions. I will just mention that we spent most of last week down in Williamsburg, Virginia, with 75 of our staff and interns and board members engaged in a long staff retreat to really help ensure that we were ready for the challenges ahead. And I'm glad to report that we finished that week exhausted, but with a sense of momentum and energy and confidence that we can actually make real the vision that we've laid out. And I will note, another thing that's just very exciting is that we have 13 new staff members who've joined us in the last few months. And I note this, one, because we are growing as an organization, but also because they're bringing on some new skill sets that we have not had in the depth that we believe we needed. Graphic design skills, product management skills, strategic planning, and that these new members of the GuideStar community are bringing skill sets and energy that are a great complement to everything that GuideStar had before. So we're really thrilled to have these new folks on board. That said, we've had a great year, but it's very important to look back and think about things that could have gone better. And in general, I would just put it under the category of moving faster. There are a number of places where I think we all would have liked to move more quickly. Evolving the user interface on our website, helping to do a better job visualizing all the data that we have. And one that I'll note in particular is that we're launching a new set of what are called APIs. And for those of you out there who are not technologists, an API is just the way that one database or one computer can talk to another one. That would, for example, allow GuideStar's data to show up on Amazon's website, as an example. And one thing that we didn't do very well in 2013 is really figure out how does one price these APIs. We want to make sure that they're available, that a hacker or a startup or a researcher is able to get access to this information and experiment with it and learn from it, but also that we're able to pay for the costs of running this technology. And in 2013, I think one place where we didn't succeed was in really figuring out how to structure the pricing around those APIs. We're almost there now, but I think going forward, we're going to be smart about how we do that even better. Overall, though, I look back on 2013 with a lot of pride and a lot of hope about this coming year. And with that, I want to hand it over to our CFO, James Lum. And you'll see right there in the corner, that's him receiving the award for Transformational Nonprofit CFO of the Year at the Washington Hilton just a few weeks ago. And so we're really proud of everything that he has done on the financial side that enables the programmatic work that justifies GuideStar's existence, and that hopefully has brought what is now the 465 of you onto this call today. So with that, let me hand it over to James to talk about our financial results for the year.
Thank you, Jacob. That was a very nice transition. But I just wanted to say that that's first and foremost a team award for GuideStar, and it really highlights how much GuideStar has changed and continues to change today and every day. And it really also shows kind of what's possible when you focus on doing more with when you actually have less. I think that's a message that is probably shared by a lot of other participants on this call, really, since we're all from the nonprofit sector. Before I got started on the financial results for everybody, I just wanted to thank Jacob and also Mari, the rest of our board, and a whole long list of people who've helped me bring this idea to life today. I think it's definitely an important step for GuideStar, and we hope that it's going to be an important step going forward for a lot of different people. And I also want to thank all the participants because we have a very wide range of participants in this call. We have representatives from foundations, educational institutions, individuals, nonprofits, national service institutions, professionals, every manner of stakeholder you could possibly imagine. So I want to thank all of you for participating on the call today. So before I get into the 2013 results, I want to give a couple of quick background pieces of information. One, GuideStar is a nonprofit. I think that that's not readily apparent to everybody all the time. We have 60 staff members. We have 3 primary office locations, DC, Williamsburg, Virginia, and also San Francisco, and some other people working out of their homes around the country. And we started nearly 20 years ago when we were solely supported by a consortium of funders who believed in our vision to make nonprofit data readily available for free. Okay, and over time, our business model has evolved away from being 100% grant funded to one that attempted to be sustainable with a mixture of programmatic revenue. And we've hit bumps and other obstacles in the path, and that brings us to where we are today. Okay, and we were also fundamentally impacted by the 2009 recession, and so I'm going to pick up the story from there and then take you into our year-end results. First, a couple of disclaimers from the finance side of things. Our 2013 numbers are preliminary and they're unaudited. Our earlier numbers are audited, and of course we'll report our final audit results later in the process. And quickly, our historical results are not necessarily indicative of our future results, and anything that we say about forward-looking items are going to contain certain known and unknown risks that may in the future mean that our results are materially different from what we're talking about today. And with that, I'm going to talk about our top-line performance over the last couple of years. These are our GAAP numbers. We have total unrestricted revenue sources on the left-hand side and our total expenses on the right-hand side. And you can see over the last couple of years, in 2010, we were still dealing with the aftermath of the recession. And so all of our revenue sources were being negatively impacted. And it took us until 2011 before we really popped back to normal. And since then, we've held pretty steady. And some of that variation there is deliberate because we're constantly adjusting our revenue mix to try and balance between our programmatic efforts and also the need to generate a sustainable business model. On the expense side, you can see that in the early years, 2010 and 11, the expenses were significantly in excess of our revenue sources. And so there was definitely a need for us to readjust our underlying business base, dial down expenses to a sustainable level, and that's what we've done in the last 2 years, in 2012 and 13, where we pared off about $1.7 million in expenses from the height in 2011. Now, I'll also note that this was done all in the context of our operational and programmatic accomplishments that Jacob highlighted so well in the last couple of slides during his presentation. And if you look at the next slide, I'm going to talk about our bottom line performance. We had relatively flat revenues, if you remember from the prior slide, but we have decreasing expenses. So if you look at the bottom line metrics of cash flow and GAAP operating income, you see what we've done in the last couple of years. When we had expenses well in excess of revenue, we were having negative cash flow and negative GAAP operating income, which was creating a very bad financial situation for us, which was essentially unsustainable. We needed to react quickly to that. As we pared down expenses, even though we kept revenue flat, we were able to finish with positive cash flow and operating income so that we can undo the hole that we had dug for ourselves and return to normalcy, build a sustainable business model, and then create a sound financial footing so that we can then continue to grow and launch a lot of initiatives that we're tackling right now that you see in Jacob's slides. So this is, if you look at the turnaround that we've had since 2010, what I'd like to point out is that we've executed basically a multi-million-dollar turnaround on the order of $2 million over the course of 3 years. And I think that that's very important to highlight because we did not take away services or data or any of the things that we offer to the sector, we actually increased those services, and at the same time we became a more efficient organization. And I attribute that primarily to bringing in a stronger financial culture and one that was based around metrics, and that's a culture that we're strengthening even further with some of the new hires that Jacob had mentioned at the end of his presentation. Now, you could look at this trajectory, this positive trajectory in both cash flow and operating income, and it should give you, it definitely gives us cause for optimism, but you know, it's kind of my job a lot of times, Jacob will laugh at me, to temper the over-exuberance and say that this is definitely, the past here is definitely not necessarily indicative of the future. We do not anticipate seeing 2014 lines that are going to be well in excess of the 2013 lines, and that's because if you look at it in a historical context, it was a financial necessity for us to, in a short-term basis, have strong cash flow and operating income to fill in the hole that we had dug so we can restore financial stability, but it's not necessarily something that we want to or will be able to sustain going forwards for a lot of reasons. Just to put it in historical context, if you look at operating income over a longer time horizon, and you look at just the green bar, which is our positive operating income over the last 2 years, collapsed into one column, that is essentially as much money as we've made, as much money as we've lost over the prior 17 years of our organizational history. And embedded in that is the starting point of GuideStar when we were 100% grant funded and we were extremely nonprofit and we were struggling to find a sustainable business model, and we didn't necessarily entirely succeed, and that's part of why over the gradual course of 17 years, we finished a little bit in the red. But we can't continue that trajectory. We had to fill it up with positive operating income. So now we've restored that balance. The two of them offset each other, and you see the net to date. Our net assets are now at $300,000 over the lifetime of the organization. And that gives us, makes us solvent and makes it possible for us to move forward and explore new investment opportunities. Similar situation with cumulative cash flow. We had great cash flow results the last 2 years, $1.1 million in new cash brought in, which added to the $1.4 million that we brought in over the prior 17 years. So we're sitting on $2.5 million worth of cash right now, which is a big improvement in our cash position, but it also shows that well, I should just say that it's less than 3 months worth of operating cash. We were operating at just over 1, and now we moved just over 2. And that's kind of the necessity of what we had to do from a cash flow perspective. Yes, we were able to move the needle significantly in the last 2 years, but when you look at it in the context over the entire history of GuideStar, it's important to note that we're still not out of the woods entirely yet. So it's with cautious optimism that I present these results. I think that it's a great amount of progress for GuideStar in the last 2 years, and it really helps us reset our financial position and prepares us for the kinds of investments and programs and impact that we want to make going forward. And I should also say that in 2014, we don't anticipate the same kinds of results. Because we're going to be investing into new programs and areas, the quarterly comparisons that we're going to have in the future impact calls will probably not be as rosy because we're going to be explicitly making a concerted effort to spend some of this cash and invest it wisely. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Jacob.
Great. Thank you so much, James. And I really want to highlight what James closed with there, which is that we've had a very good couple of years financially, but again, that is just a means to an end. It is, we celebrate that because of what it will enable us to do, not for its own sake, because of the way it will help us advance our mission to bring good information about nonprofits to the stakeholders of social change so that they can make better decisions and we can all have a better world. So with that, I'm going to ask Lindsay to suggest some questions that we've gotten from the audience. I know we've already gotten far more than we could answer, but Lindsay, why don't you suggest a couple, and James and Mari and I will do our best to answer them.
Sounds great. And I do want to remind people we'll get to additional answers on the GuideStar blog, and I just want to provide that link really quickly. It's npo.gs/ICYE2013. So again, and you will also get an email with the presentation soon. So let's dive into the questions. The first question is from Yvonne Wallace-Blaine of the Fellow Mortals Wildlife Hospital. Thanks for being with us, Yvonne. She says, how can a small nonprofit working with limited funds show to donors that it is using the funds available efficiently and well? So, for example, staff volunteering necessary time and not incurring debt, but operating with monies received.
So, Yvonne, I mean, this is a question that thousands of your colleagues face every day. And I like to talk about how there are two rules to nonprofit communications. And when you're thinking about raising money, it's really about communicating with donors. And the first one is no numbers without stories, and the second one is no stories without numbers. And you know, I take it from your organization's title, Fellow Mortals, that you are working with animals, and I'm sure you have some extraordinary stories about your work. And I think our challenge is to match those stories with numbers. And those numbers do sometimes need to be financial to show that you're running your organization with integrity and with rigor, but they also really need to be programmatic. And your ability to show the number of animals served, how long are they with you, what is their health when they come in, what's their health when they come out, how many people are interacting with the animals, whatever the right metrics are for you, that the fundamental challenge is to have both the stories and the numbers. Now, with GuideStar, we want to be a part of that and make that as easy as possible. We want to take some of the burden off of your shoulders and put it on ours, because that's our job. And you know, the GuideStar Exchange is the most important way that we do that. And so maintaining your profile on GuideStar Exchange is a critical way to get in front of the 6.7 million people that we have on our website each year. But also, as I mentioned before, some of the other partners that are using GuideStar's data, whether it's the donor-advised funds of large national financial institutions like Fidelity or Schwab, or partner organizations like Volunteer Match, or, as I mentioned before, Amazon or Facebook Causes. And that our hope is that we can get to a point where you can keep that data up to date on our site and know that it is being distributed throughout the web, so that you're able to reach more potential donors, volunteers, and others. But ultimately, we're going to do everything we can to make that as easy and convenient for you as possible. But ultimately, it comes back to the work that you're doing to make a better world for our fellow mortals, and your ability to simultaneously tell really compelling stories, but also offer data that shows a level of rigor and results that I think your donors would really care about.
Great, thank you. We have one question that is for both of you, but maybe more for you, James. Did GuideStar's auditors remove the going concern footnote from the audited financial statements? If so, what steps did GuideStar take to satisfy the auditors? And if not, what is GuideStar's plan?
No. The answer is no, because they never actually added a going concern footnote to our financials. I will admit that they were under strong consideration to do so, and we had to work very hard to persuade them that our financial picture did not warrant that. And we did obviously turn a lot of our financial metrics around, so that is definitely no longer a concern. In my opinion, I can't speak for the auditors.
Oh, great. Thanks. That was concise. Okay. Jill Santuccio with Prism Communications, and I hope I pronounced that right, Jill, said, in the past, nonprofits haven't been able to change or edit the information that is displayed to the public on GuideStar. How do you see that changing, and where, how, and when do nonprofits get involved in their own reporting with what's displayed?
So with there, and Lindsay made kind of a funny face as she was reading that aloud, because It is true that if information is entered on a government tax form, like the Form 990, that we're going to present what's on that form. However, through the GuideStar Exchange, it's really important to us to allow nonprofits to have the ability to help shape how they tell their own story on the web. So the GuideStar Exchange does very much allow a nonprofit to update basic information, everything from contact information to your goals and strategies, everything from personnel to your finances, and to provide more up-to-date, deeper information than's provided on the 990. That said, we're not going to change what is in a government document. And one of our challenges is being able to represent visually these different kinds of information. But yeah, I would encourage you to use the GuideStar Exchange and ensure that, as more than 40,000 other nonprofits have done, that you're able to have some control over how your story is told to all the stakeholders of social change.
Great, and this is somewhat related. GuideStar Exchange, this question came in from Twitter. Once information is submitted by nonprofits required for silver or gold designation, how soon is that level confirmed, and how is it confirmed?
So that's a good question. I'm not actually sure.
I can maybe answer that. We have someone going in, our nonprofit support team, which there are 3 people on that team. They go in every day to approve those, and we just verify that the person that is asking for permission and updating the form is affiliated with the organization, and we do that through email address. So we do that every day. So, you know, I'd like to say 1 to 2 business days is the longest it will take, and there is a staff that goes in and verifies that and approves it. So I actually had an answer. How exciting.
Very good. And then in terms of what it takes to reach those levels, it's simply a question of filling out certain parts of the form, or more generally put, answering certain questions. The GuideStar Exchange is not a rating mechanism. We aren't making a judgment about your ability to achieve your mission. What we are doing is trying to provide a structured way that, that nonprofits can tell their own story and do it in a way that's as convenient and easy and clear as possible.
Great. Another question. We have a team watching in Boston, and they have 2 questions. So I'm going to give 2. You were able to answer both or either. What are the goals for completing charting impact in the impact tab? And then secondly, they're interested in key performance indicators for the sector. Does GuideStar have guidance or see a move to that occurring?
So I would say these 2 questions are really quite linked to each other. So charting impact is an initiative that we've been a part of with our partners at Independent Sector and the Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance. And it is simply an attempt to figure out what are the basic questions about your goals and strategies that every nonprofit should answer. I like to call it structured, qualitative, programmatic feedback. Now let me explain what I mean by that. It's structured because everybody answers the same questions. It's qualitative because the answers come in the form of sentences and not numbers. And it's programmatic because it's about the change you're trying to create in the world and not necessarily just your finances. And the 5 questions are, to oversimplify, what are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to get there? What will you measure to track your progress? What's your capacity as an organization, and what's happened so far? These are pretty straightforward questions. And to achieve gold level in the GuideStar Exchange, you have to answer these 5 questions. And these, I believe, are universal. Nonprofits are incredibly diverse. They range from a corner soup kitchen to Harvard University. But every nonprofit should be able to answer these questions. However, I mentioned they were qualitative, that the answers come in the form of sentences. That's really valuable. That can be really helpful. But we are also excited to try and figure out how do we, as a field, find quantitative measures of our impact on society. Whether that is the number of kids who get inoculated against a disease, or the number of acres of wetlands that are protected, or the number of people who come to our art museum to see a new contemporary art show, whatever it may be. We know that, as I said before, we have to match stories with numbers. And it is our hope that we can help the nonprofit sector do that. I think most anyone who's in the nonprofit sector knows that a lot of funders are pushing for more and more quantitative, programmatic data. And we think overall that's a very positive shift. But we also know that it's a lot of work for people, and it's pretty confusing. And so it is our hope over the course of this year, and this is one of our goals for the year, to begin to experiment with some new tools that can help to gather these kinds of metrics. Now that said, one thing that we recognize is that the nonprofit sector is incredibly diverse, and we don't want to force a homeless shelter to measure the number of acres protected. It's just not going to make any sense. So one of our challenges is to try and figure out how do we offer different metrics that make sense for different kinds of nonprofits, and then also allow nonprofits to add their own questions, things that they've chosen to measure that make sense for their work. We never want to impose on the nonprofit community some particular metric. Instead, we want to allow the diversity of the nonprofit sector to reveal itself. And so we've code-named this. Lindsay will probably be mad at me, but we've talked about it as GuideStar Platinum. So we're trying to figure out how to do that in a way that will make sense for nonprofits. So that's something that you can expect to see more from us over the next year.
Great. Someone said, how can you define images? I think someone mentioned something, 4.026 million images.
Yeah,
and how many organizational 990s do we have?
When we're talking about, this is James, when we're talking about images, we're talking about visual images captured of the 990s that have been filed with the IRS. And the reason that language crops up is because that's how the IRS houses and distributes the 990s that it collects. If you go to the IRS website, you can purchase in bulk images, TIFF files of the 990s. And we post those, we convert those into PDF images that are then posted on our website, and we also digitize a significant number of those by double key entry process. So that data can then be machine readable, and you can then display it on a website. You can transport it through APIs, or you can download it from our website. And that's kind of the difference between the range of availability of data.
That's right. So images can be helpful, but it's a whole lot more useful when it's in digitized form, and you can track change over time, and you can search for it, and you can visualize it. So we're not able to digitize every single one of those 4 million forms, but we're able to do a significant proportion of that. And we want to offer both of those different ways of accessing information to our users.
Great. Someone said, we would love to hear Jacob talking about the role community foundations are playing in GuideStar strategy.
Absolutely. So community foundations are a critical part of our strategy going forward. On one of the slides, let's see, oh yeah, the slide that's up right now has Donor Edge profiles. So Donor Edge is a partnership that GuideStar has with 16 community foundations across the country. This is something that first came out of the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation and has spread across the community foundation landscape. And this allows a given community foundation that always has far better relationships with the nonprofits in its community to create a platform of data for the members of their community with information about nonprofits in that community. And GuideStar helps to power some of the technology behind that. But this is really something that's about the community foundations on the ground. They're the ones that are really able to make use of it because they're in that community and they have those relationships. So as we have here on this slide, almost 7,000 nonprofits in the U.S. have given their local community foundation extra detail about their work through that community foundation's Donor Edge platform. And they're all over the country. We have partnerships in San Diego, in Boston, in Sacramento, in Orlando, in Sarasota. And our hope is that we can continue to build out this network and be a backbone that connects all these communities together. And again, what we want to do is we want to take the burden off of the community foundation of building this technology and allow them to focus on what they're good on, which is understanding their community, its needs, and its resources.
Great. James, you mentioned that expenses were cut. Can you explain how?
Well, sure. The main thing that we did with expenses was to look at them systematically and be more thoughtful about how we planned out our expenses. A lot of it was in simply not hiring back and replacing personnel that had left for one reason or another. So it was just tightening our belts, and we really didn't make any, big cuts in anything. So, for instance, this year against budget, we saved over $1.5 million against budgeted expenses, not because we cut whole areas of programs, but because we just spent our money smarter. So it was really, doing it at the front end and then seeing the results through to the end.
Great.
And we found efficiencies in travel, in marketing, in some of the technology partners we work with to do this digitization.
Yep.
And
we saved the 40% in our digitization cost by renegotiating our contract.
Exactly.
And so it was things like that we hadn't paid attention to in the past, and made an explicit, concerted effort to do something differently. And then obviously it took a lot of time to do some of these things, some more than others.
And there was a period where we had to take on what we called a contraction mindset, which is we really had to tighten our belts and really had to cut back on some things that are really important, like travel. But we feel that we've shifted beyond that and returned to what we like to call an expansion mindset, and that we've been able to cut expenses without cutting quality. And in fact, our programmatic results have gone up. So we like to think that our productivity has increased as well.
Great. Someone asked, how is GuideStar making its products more accessible to small nonprofits and mid-cap nonprofits with limited funds? Do you anticipate a more realistic sliding scale approach?
Another great question. This comes up a lot. And the truth is, a lot of the pricing for many of our products, although not all of them, was really designed for accounting firms or law firms or large universities or big donor-advised funds or foundations. And that meant that some nonprofits that we didn't necessarily think wanted these particular products, but they actually found them useful, but they felt priced out of them. So we've been looking at our pricing for a number of our products. And there's certain cases where we've already put in pricing that's designed for nonprofits. So for example, with our financial scan product that we created in partnership with the Nonprofit Finance Fund, we created a pricing level that allows an organization to basically just get one of these scans, and that's meant to be for you, for your organization. And that's much cheaper than the level that's really designed more for foundations or financial services firms or consultants that allows you to get as many of these analysis reports as you want. So we're trying to figure that out, but it's a really good question, and we need to go farther on this. We have some work ahead of us to figure out how can we have new kinds of tiered pricing that really allow some of our additional products. Now again, it's worth emphasizing that 98% of our users use our data for free, but there's a set of people that really we think could make good use of some of our products that do have a fee. And so we've got some work, and it's a great reminder to continue pushing on that.
Yeah, again, I add one thing to that, which is that GuideStar is making some leaps and bounds as far as understanding and connecting with our customers more and our users. In the past, we tended to think of them in monotones, as if there was only one type of customer out there and only one price point and one product each in every case. And we're belatedly realizing that there's vast differences between data that they're interested in, how they're going to use it, what kind of organization they are, and what kind of prices make sense for them. So we're breaking it down into a lot more user-friendly components, and we're slowly making our way through that process.
We recently hired a new head of products and marketing, Evan Paul, who's based in our California office. And he will not let us talk about customers in general. He is constantly demanding that we focus on the unique needs and capabilities of different user groups. And a big piece of that is pricing. So that's going to be something that is consistent with our broader strategy, and I think we'll be well positioned to make some of those changes over the next year.
Great. So I'm going to flag for us, we've got about 9 minutes, so I'd say we can get to hopefully 5 or 6 more questions. I would love to hear what diversity and inclusion looks like internally, for example, staff, board, and committees at GuideStar and in its engagement of under-resourced or culturally specific nonprofits.
So, I mean, this is an essential question for all of society right now. We live in a very diverse world, and we need our institutions to reflect that. You know, it is fair to say that I think GuideStar is in pretty good shape, but we've got a lot to learn and a lot more that we can do. Our board is half people of color. Our leadership team is a third people of color. Our overall staff is not quite that diverse. So we've made some progress so that we represent or we reflect the diversity of the society that we're trying to serve. But we still have more we can do. And I think this is especially true when it comes to serving really small nonprofits, especially those that are operating within disadvantaged communities. And this gets back to the segmentation question, because even if we have a segment which is nonprofits, that is going to include everything from the corner soup kitchen to Harvard University. So we're going to have some work to do to make sure that we are truly accessible and useful to the wide breadth of communities in this country and maybe eventually around the world. And that's something we can talk about. As you know, GuideStar has historically been very focused within the U.S., and that's something that we're trying to think about, how to reflect the needs of people outside of the U.S. and the interest of people within the U.S. in all the rest of the world. So we've made some progress, but I think we still have a ways to go on that.
Great. Here's another question from Twitter. @MyLawPractice asks, what are your thoughts on the debate concerning the cost of transparency and financial reporting?
James, you want to tackle this first?
I'd say that there's a cost. I'd flip that around a little bit and make the statement that there's a cost to non-transparent open data as well. One of the reasons that we put together this impact call was to address what I call the time value of information. And we want to have relevant, timely conversations about the issues of the day. And if the bread and butter for the nonprofit sector is the 990, or at least that's the commonly agreed upon one, well, that data is not readily available until at least 5 months after the end of your period, fiscal period, when it's due to the IRS, and it takes almost a year on average for it to make its way through the system. So how valuable is having a conversation based on data that's in excess of a year old? And when it comes to healthcare or education or anything else, that's not acceptable in my personal view. It should be something that's timely and consistent. So there are significant costs or potential costs to having a conversation and making decisions based on non-timely information. And you have to weigh that against the cost of making it timely. I'd like to say that in the interest of making our data more timely and available, it quote-unquote cost nothing extra. It cost us for this WebEx, but it was more of a cost as far as changing our process around to line up with this afternoon at this particular time. But it really didn't create a whole lot of extra work. We didn't have to hire people to do this per se.
And I would just add, I agree with everything that James just said, but you know, sometimes there is a cost, and it's often worth it. But often it's possible to drive down that cost. And so much of what GuideStar is trying to do is drive down that cost for the whole field, and to make it as easy as possible to share your information as a nonprofit once and know that that information is going to go to the right parts of the sector. It's going to show up in the right software programs. It's going to show up on the right documents. And that's going to take us years to do. But that's a burden that we want to take on our shoulders. Now, that said, there are always going to be times where it's not worth it to be transparent. But we see a huge amount of headroom, of space for more transparency that will be helpful to make us more effective, more trustworthy, and along the way, we really hope that we can help to drive down that cost.
Great. Someone said, what is the vision for this type of call for nonprofits? Is GuideStar suggesting that they will host this forum for nonprofits?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, we don't really know, honestly. I mean, this is an experiment for us. We wanted to see if it was a useful way for us to communicate with our constituents, and I guess we're going to find out if you all found it useful. I think it was helpful for us to force us to get our message straight and to think through how we organize and share information about our own results. We're going to keep doing this. Maybe we'll do it forever. We have to do it a few more times to keep learning and see what makes sense. We don't expect every single nonprofit to do this, but it may make sense for a significant subportion of nonprofits to do something like this. There are already at least a couple others that we've heard of, Root Capital and the 1 Acre Fund, that do similar calls. We do certainly hope that it's a mechanism to encourage more nonprofits to systematically share their data through one channel or another. It might not be a conference call or a WebEx. It might just be on their website or through GuideStar Exchange or through some mechanism that's appropriate for them. But we do hope to advance a conversation about how do we have meaningful, timely data that helps us all be more effective.
And I just add that I'd agree with Jacob that there's definitely no insistence that everybody should do it this way. It would be nice if some considered doing it perhaps in a similar fashion. I think it's more important to start a dialogue about thinking about what does transparency mean and thinking about certain additional parameters than we've thought about it in the past. We've been focusing on 4 of these in particular. There may be plenty of others that other people would suggest, but I think that's a question of being more timely, not waiting for the IRS to publicize it for you, not letting the IRS define what is important. You know, it's not just financial, it's also programmatic. So it's timeliness, how comprehensive your results are, making it open and not having it closed to just your funders or who owns your debt or your board, but making it open to everyone, and then making it an interactive dialogue and not just reporting in a one-way direction your results, but having it open to a 2-way dialogue with other stakeholders. That's all I had to say.
Great. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. It's a minute 2. What's your take on donors increasingly treating philanthropy as investments rather than just donations? For example, do you find that donors are treating philanthropy as they would treat their financial investments in the commercial sector?
So this is certainly a shift. The question is how deep is it, in my mind? Philanthropy is always going to be a deeply emotional and personal act. That said, people have recognized that there are things we can learn from other parts of society to help us be more effective. And I believe that it's possible to do that without losing the soul and the spirit and the fundamental gestures of altruism that we find in the best philanthropy. So this shift is happening, and that's why it's so important to bridge numbers and stories so that we can do both. And we're going to all have to collectively figure out how to do this together. And with that, I think we probably need to close. I'm realizing, we're right at the end. I really want to thank you all for your time and your questions. We got 65 questions. I know we didn't get to all of them. But Lindsay, thank you all, and Lindsay, do you have any kind of closing comments for us?
We want your feedback. As mentioned earlier, this was a experiment for us, so we'd love to hear, yes, your additional questions, but also what you thought of this call. So please do join the GuideStar blog post, the dialogue that's going there. We've already received a couple comments. That link is here on the slide. It's npo.gs/ICYE 2013, and thanks for being with us again.